Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa says his country deserves a chance to develop and recover from the current economic crisis. He says the lifting of economic sanctions by the United States, Britain and the European Union will allow his country to start rebuilding. He made the remarks after an anti-sanctions march in Harare, which was attended by more than 3,000 people. The African Union, including South Africa, supports the call to lift the sanctions. Mnangagwa says the sanctions are the primary reason why restoring stability to the economy has been so difficult. He noted that the European Union has begun softening its stance towards Zimbabwe. He says he hopes America can afford Zimbabwe the same chance. Mnangagwa, like a late former President Robert Mugabe, blames the sanctions imposed by the US and EU since 2001 for the economic ills and says they are intended to remove his party from power.
We call on the United States government to immediately and unconditionally remove the sanctions they have imposed on our country for the sake of our children, living and unborn, our youth, our women, the elderly, and our economy as a whole. We, the people of Zimbabwe, deserve to grow, deserve to develop, we deserve to modernize, we deserve to industrialize and prosper without albatross of sanctions imposed by the United States of America.
In Harare, many stayed away from the demonstrations, saying they were a distraction from the president's mishandling of the economy. Zimbabwe is plagued by 18-hour daily power cuts and shortages of foreign exchange, fuel and medicines. SABC reporter Ephert Musekiwa was following developments in Harare.
The government went all out, issuing out statements, making publicity stunts. You know, they did everything they could to make sure that people attended this day. They even went to the extent of declaring the day a national holiday so that people would get time to come and attend this event. But as the day progressed, remember it was the proceedings were supposed to start at 6 a.m. But by that time there were very few people gathered at the gathering area. And when the march began, there were just a few thousands. We expected more than that. We expected 10 times more than that. But there were a few thousands that marched alongside the First Lady who led the marchers. They marched from Robert Mugabe Square to the National Stadium, where later on the President Emmerson Mnangagwa addressed the nation. But surprisingly, for the second time, the stadium was not filled to capacity. It was half empty. There were not that many people as a lot of people had anticipated that the day would turn up.
For more on this, we are joined in studio by Director of Zimbabwe Exiles Forum, Tino Mambeu, and from our Pretoria Studio we have political analyst Dr William Mpofu. Tino, good evening. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this evening. But starting with you, Dr Mpofu, what do you understand about the nature of the sanctions against Zimbabwe? Because my understanding is that these are specifically targeted against certain individuals and companies, but not the whole of Zimbabwe.
Yes, what is officially being presented by the President of Zimbabwe is a grand narrative of falsehoods in that the sanctions are targeted, directed towards individuals and certain organizations and institutions, and these sanctions can therefore not be the cause of the economic and political decay that is presently ensuing in Zimbabwe. And these sanctions are targeted at people that have been implicated in crimes against humanity, massive corruption, political violence, and other heinous crimes against the people of Zimbabwe. So this excuse-making, distribution of blame, diversionary tactics will not do anything to contribute to the solution to the crisis that is taking place in Zimbabwe. And President Mnangagwa should be the first person to realize that.
Now, Tino, Thank you for joining us. You took part in a march today. Tell us about that march, because you're known to be, to speak against the leading ZANU-PF party, which is in government, led by President Emmerson Mnangagwa. Talk to us about today's march and what it meant for you to be there, taking part in a march that was in South Africa and in Zimbabwe.
Well, first and foremost, Lulu, I want to correct one thing here. I am not a critic of the government. I don't criticize Mr. Mnangagwa. I criticize his deeds. I criticize his actions. I criticize his heartlessness. I criticize his inability or his, the lack of desire to make sure that the people of Zimbabwe can at least enjoy being Zimbabwean. That is what I criticize. Now, we have a situation here where we have got the whole of SADC. I mean, from the African National Congress and certain member states of the SADC, that then said that today, the 25th, is a day where they are going to be demonstrating or to be speaking out against the so-called sanctions. But we have said to SADC, it's like you go hunting and you have got a dog that is blind and it runs faster than the prey. That dog will not catch the prey because it's blind. So what SADC is doing here is running ahead of time, running ahead of events, and trying to fix the problem from the far end of the problem. The Zimbabwean problem is not sanctions. Sanctions are a result or are a symptom of the political decay, lack of reforms, corruption, human rights abuses, and the unwillingness of the Zimbabwean government, at least to an extent, to implement the 2013 constitution, which document they signed and they agreed. So when we marched today, I went there with other Zimbabweans, and ZANU-PF and the ANC had their own march where they denounced the sanctions. But we also marched and said, SADC, while you are doing this very, very wonderful effort to try and get the sanctions removed, let us at least help you to identify the common problem. Because it seems as if you are not in a position to understand what really is bothering Zimbabweans. So we went to express ourselves as Zimbabweans to say the cause of sanctions is the misdemeanor, the misbehavior, the unwillingness of Mr. Mnangagwa to realize that for Zimbabwe to move, it will have to move out of truth, it will have to move out of being honest, it will have to move out of realizing that when soldiers kill people on the street, they have to be brought to book. Mr. Mohlante was in Zimbabwe. There was a commission of inquiry. He made recommendations that these soldiers who then shot people must be brought to book. One of the commanders who commanded those soldiers that you saw marauding, shooting at 45 degrees, as they said, gunning down 12 civilians, he was promoted, he became an ambassador. And now they call the whole of SADC to say, come and march. One of our people who is now the ambassador was placed on sanctions by the United States of America. Let's march against that. But they forget that the people of Zimbabwe remain poor, remain isolated, remain without a voice. That is why we went to Pretoria to try and send an alternative message, which message is the actual truth of the situation at the end.
Now, Dr. Mpofu, I saw you agreeing there with a lot of what Tino has been saying here with us in studio. Let's speak about the fact that, these sanctions are against less than 150 individuals and close to 60 entities, companies. Can we seriously blame the meltdown that we're seeing in Zimbabwe on these individuals and these entities? And, are they the real reason why inflation is so high and, fuel and food shortages?
It's far from the truth that these specifically targeted sanctions are the cause of the problems in Zimbabwe. And you can tell that Tino has an intimate understanding of the situation on the ground and what is happening. That's why you see me affirming him. The ship of state is sinking. Zimbabweans are sinking into more and more poverty. People are dying in hospitals. The education system has collapsed. The health system has collapsed. It's a genocide in actuality. And these people continue distributing excuses and apportioning blame. what is happening here is that even the 3,000 people that marched, the people that attended at the National Sports Stadium, are the loud statistics that tell you that ordinary and common Zimbabweans are not buying into this fiction that the sanctions from Europe and from the United States of America are the cause of the poverty in Zimbabwe. I can hear you.
Dr. Mpofu, continue. We can hear you.
Yes.
All right, we seem to be having some issues there with Dr. Mpofu not hearing us clearly. But Tino, just what he's saying, that you have your ear to the ground and you know exactly what seems to be the biggest issues and problems on the ground in Zimbabwe. You know, how do you think this can be rectified? Do you think, as you said SADC is way ahead of itself in calling for sanctions to be removed against these individuals and entities? What needs to happen in Zimbabwe?
Look, what we have seen today at the stadium, or in Zimbabwe in some other cities, in Bulawayo, in Mutare, in Masvingo, where the man who calls himself president, I have nothing against Mr. Mnangagwa. I actually love him. I adore him. He comes from my village. You know, he failed to fill up the stadium. You report correctly that probably 3,000, 5,000 people attended. Now, is that not an indictment? Is that not a clear statement to say that this man is not wanted by the people? So what is SADC talking about? Can they not see the optics? Now, will the ANC want to tell us that people failed to go to the stadium because Zimbabwe is under sanctions? Is that what they are going to say? Is it not that ZANU-PF and the government provided $4.5 million US for this program of the anti-sanctions march to take effect? $4.5 million US was provided from the taxpayers' money. And how many people attended? 3,000 people. So it means Zimbabweans in general don't believe that these sanctions are real problems. I'll give you perfect real-life scenarios here that we don't need to shy away from. We've got to say it as it is. We've got to call a spade a spade. In 2017, November, Mr. Mnangagwa came into power via a coup, which some of us really celebrated because we thought we were going to move into a better direction for the people. Because what matters to me is not what kind of baboon is in the office. Whether it's a male or female baboon doesn't really matter. What I need to see as Zimbabwean is that I've got a functioning society, I've got a functioning hospital, I've got functioning education, I can go home and enjoy myself. So we celebrated and said, Mr. Mnangagwa, here you come. Let's move together, let's make Zimbabwe better. But what did he do? 3 billion disappeared, US dollars, or I don't know which currency they want to call it, but I call it US dollars, some will call it RTGS dollars, whichever currency, because in 2017, they had declared that one bond note is equal to $1 US. 3 billion then disappeared from the state coffers being directed to a shoddy program called Command Agriculture. After that Command Agriculture, Zimbabwe now has got no food. We are again importing maize. So it shows the level of theft within government. 25 million at NRZ, 60 million at ZESA, and today 1,000 buses, only to bus 3,000 people. So this maladministration, failure to realize that the state coffers are not for personal self-aggrandizement. State coffers are for the people. Government's purpose is to make sure that they feed to the interests of the people. Now, as much as I want sanctions to be lifted from Zimbabwe, I still maintain that ZANU-PF must realize that in itself, they have no capacity to rule. They've dismally failed. Mr. Mnangagwa has dismally failed. It is high time SADC has seen that he failed to bring people to the stadium. This man is not wanted by the people. Why can't we then, at least in the interests of the common man on the street, you have a genuine dialogue, not a group of losers speaking to one another, like they've done with Thokozani Kupe, Brian Mteki, and all others that are gathering and calling themselves Pollard. They've been gathering, I think, for the past 3-4 months. The inflation rate has gone haywire. Why is it like that? In 2009 to 2013, we had a government of national unity. Did you hear any figures of inflation reaching 627%? No, it never happened like that. So definitely, even if there were sanctions during the government of national unity, there was medication in hospitals. We could buy bread anytime wanted bread. We could buy fuel anytime wanted fuel. Why is it that when ZANU-PF alone is in power, things go haywire? That is where the problem. That is what SADC must be looking at. Why did SADC not go and ask for these sanctions to be removed during 2013-2009 period of national government of national unity? It defies common logic. So as Africans, I personally as a young African, I wish to see a continent that is progressive. I wish to see a continent that has got young people who realize that unless we decide to introspect, tell our leaders the truth, tell ourselves the truth, that indeed we have the capability. Why would a country, Lolo, which has got billions and billions worth of diamonds, which has got arable land, which has got dams, which has got all the 32 minerals you talk of, go and cry about US sanctions? Is it America alone who buys diamonds in the world? Is it the European Union alone who buys diamonds in the world? They can sell diamonds anyway. In fact, they are doing it. Just last week, 10 million worth of diamonds disappeared. And nothing is happening about it. And now they want to force and frog march all Zimbabweans to say we are under sanctions. That is a lame excuse. We don't accept it. If Mr. Mnangagwa is incapable of ruling the country and making the people prosperous, he should quit power and leave power to people that are able. And if the next person who is coming is unable again, then he has got to go. There's no reason why we must waste our time spending millions on useless matches.
Now, Dr. Mpofu, can you hear us now?
I can hear you nicely.
Okay, great. Now, in the beginning, when Emmerson Mnangagwa took over as leader of the country, there was a lot of goodwill around President Mnangagwa and his investment drive, and calling for investment for companies to invest in Zimbabwe. That has clearly fizzled out. Where did it all go wrong? Now, I'm posing this question to both of you gentlemen.
Indeed, the man and his faction failed to ride on the euphoria that accompanied the removal of Robert Mugabe from power. And that failure is based on nothing except the poverty of thought and poverty of leadership that has accompanied his regime, that has concentrated on consolidating the power of a faction within a political party, and that has concentrated on consolidating political patronage, corruption, and other toxic isms instead of statesmanship, diplomacy, and economic recovery. What has happened is that Mnangagwa has failed to give an example of leadership whereby his personal friends, companies owned by his sons, and directly that way by him, have been implicated in manipulating currency, trading in the black market, and nothing has happened to these people under his watch. And Zimbabweans are not fools. They are watching this. They can see that there is some political gamesmanship pulling wool around the eyes of the people, and it's a crisis of confidence, crisis of legitimacy, crisis of leadership, and he is not the man that is equipped with the intellectual and political resources that are equal to the problem that Zimbabwe faces. And this speaks to the failure of Robert Mugabe to provide mentorship, a succession plan that could produce a leader that could lead better than him in Zimbabwe. Because tragically, if you speak to the common Zimbabwean today, you meet some people that say, after all, under Robert Mugabe, it was better, which is tragic because Mugabe cultivated a tyranny, conducted a genocide, decayed the economy, all for personal and partisan leadership at the expense of the country. So Mnangagwa has been tragic, and Tino is right. This is failure, and nothing can help this besides the men stepping aside. There are many talented Zimbabweans that can contribute to the betterment of the situation.
Tino, what went wrong?
We marched on the 17th of November in 2017. We had this hope that a new Zimbabwe had come. We thought that Mr. Mugabe is the one that is responsible for our suffering. We gave Mr. Mnangagwa goodwill. We said, take over. On 18 April in Ethiopia, there's a young man called Abiy Ahmed. He became president. Just 2 weeks ago, he won a Nobel Peace Prize. Not because it's not that he took Ethiopia and took it to Mars and came back from Mars and did some wonders. He never did that. He realized that for Ethiopia to move, you have got to realize who are your enemies, do you call the enemies of the state, who are the main actors in the political society of Ethiopia. He realized that he implemented serious reforms. But Mr. Mnangagwa, after taking over power, he does not do that. What does he do? He summons a jet from Dubai. That jet takes him from Harare to Bulawayo. Summoning a jet 7,000 kilometers away, 7,000 kilometers away, to come and take you in your country, to just roam around in your own country, and you are crying about sanctions. While you are on the plane, you enjoy niceties. We saw him posting pots, dishing cow heels, on the plane. This is a man who is relaxed. He's saying, I'm on top of our friends now. We have just left France where there was a health fund, blah, blah, blah. He was so enjoying himself. This is not what we asked. We asked a man that would take us out of the extremes that Mr. Mnangagwa had, Mr. Mugabe had created. And Mr. E.D. is a man who was given the ball, a penalty. Take a penalty, there is no goalkeeper on the gate. Just score for the Zimbabweans. We want to lift you up. We want to walk with you. I personally went to Zim. I personally went to express my desire to come back home. And I said, this is what we have been waiting for. Mugabe is gone now. Zimbabwe is starting on a new slate. I spoke the language that people understood. But 3-4 months down the line, people die like rabbits in the street, like they are being slaughtered for meat. All under his watch, and nothing happens. As if that is not all. We know that in Africa we've got dictators. We go to Rwanda, we have got Mr. Kagame. He has been in power for 20 or so years, 25 years probably. But the people are not crying because he's a benevolent dictator. As much as Mr. Mnangagwa could want to be a dictator, at least he has a heart. The only problem that he has is his heart is stone cold. You can't continue climbing up the ladder of success when the people you purport to be ruling are suffering day in, day out. So there is no end to this all. Unless SADC decides to be gentleman enough, stop this dictator, calling each other friends and that we have been in the liberation. We are past the liberation phase. ANC is falling into a very stupid trap. Now they were marching in Pretoria. Why are they marching? Do they not realize that we Zimbabweans are not marching? Why would they want to march on our behalf? Do they think that as educated as they prepared that we are stupid? That we don't understand where we should take our country to? They must actually be asking us, and we'll be telling them, frankly, that this is where we are getting it wrong. This is where we have got to fix. And we fix A, B, C, D, we don't have a problem. But unfortunately, as they are marching, would you have expected the ANC to say, no, Zimbabwe is under sanctions. We are not going to deport any Zimbabwean. Zimbabweans, come to South Africa because your country is unlivable. America has declared war on you. We are giving you refugee from the sanctions that America has put on you. If they have not done that, they continue to arrest us left, right, and center. If it is not arrest, it's xenophobia. So where is the ANC standing? Where is the ANC's ideological position? How can you claim that we are fighting to remove sanctions and arrest us here if indeed Zimbabwe is unlivable because of sanctions? Why can't they accommodate us here?
What needs to happen? The SADC has to play a role. The AU has to play a role. You're speaking of the ANC playing a role in terms of not arresting people or deporting people. People must come to South Africa. There must be a clarion call. That's what you're basically saying, Tino. We had the UN ambassador for refugees a couple of weeks ago who was here in South Africa and stated the fact that South Africa has got a lot on its hands in terms of dealing with refugees, dealing with illegal immigrants, dealing with people who need assistance, asylum seekers. Where then does that money have to come from? Because now this is an issue that is not only a South African problem, it's a global issue. Dr. Mpofu, how do we then deal with that? Because Tino's calling for South Africa's government or the leadership to open the borders. How do we do that and ensure that we have people coming into the country, but people who are documented and we know exactly where they are and what they do?
How do we talk about documentation when we can march together against sanctions? What documentation are we talking about? Are we not saying that we are one people? If you are marching together in Pretoria and all over. We are simply saying that we are one people. So if we are one people, let us hear one another. If indeed there is a problem of sanctions which is causing illegal immigration, then they must welcome us here. But we are saying to SADC, no, that is not the problem. The problem is directly at the doorstep of the current regime, which has denied to implement reforms 7 years after adopting a constitution. We have got a law called POSA, we have got a law called IPA, which is used, by the way. I just want to bring something here so that you understand how dangerous this regime is, or how mischievous they
Very quickly, because we have run out of time.
Very quickly. There's MDC applied for a march for the 24th of this very month. They were denied. They were said you cannot march. ZANU-PF does not apply to anyone for a march. They go into the streets willy-nilly. They enjoy Zimbabwe as if they are the only Zimbabweans. What kind of hypocrisy is that?
Tino, hold it there. Dr. Mpofu, where to now for Zimbabwe? Very quickly, we have run out of time, gentlemen.
I think South Africa, as SADC and AU, should realize that part of the problem of immigration is connected to tyrannies, despotism that are taking place in Africa, including Zimbabwe. And that by following these cheap shots and supporting these opportunistic excuses, SADC will be found one day with the AU and South Africa itself to be complicit in genocide. Because as I speak, if you go to the hospitals in Zimbabwe, you go to check what is happening. People are dying of treatable diseases because resources are not being made available. The health sector has collapsed, education has collapsed, and that contributes to illegal immigration into South Africa. So the solution is political, is diplomatic, and must be forceful. Africa must stop tendering and nurturing dictators. A few months ago, Trump used a metaphor of the toilet to name Africa. And people like Mnangagwa and what they are doing with this faction that is currently leading Zimbabwe and that junta are actually affirming those stereotypes of Africa as a toilet and not as a landed and a peopled continent. And we should muster enough courage and enough intelligence as Africans to stop a brother if he is practicing tyranny, decaying economy, and killing people like what the Mnangagwa regime is doing in Zimbabwe right now.
Dr. Mpofu, unfortunately we have run out of time. We have to leave it here for now. Thank you so much for joining us. And Dr. Mpofu is coming from our Pretoria studios. And I have got Tino, Mambeu in studio. Always a lively discussion with the two gentlemen in studio with us. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for your time.